So I want to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Aman Bhar, who is going to be talking about a very interesting topic, innovating cybersecurity. So I'm going to give you a quick introduction about Mr. Aman. Aman has had considerable experience in business process and security posture transformation within several industries, including government, banking, process, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, healthcare, transportation, large infrastructure management, and the IT industries for the last 25 years, with an initial career launch in the e-commerce arena. Aman Bhar's speaking and teaching engagements are primarily in the EU, North America, and the Middle East, where he assists some of the world's largest organizations in assuring their highly complex processes. He is constantly engaged in helping businesses optimize their information security visions as part of a wider continuous improvement initiative. He is acknowledged as an expert consultant and trainer, serving large organizations with cutting-edge information security practices and experience. Just give me 2 minutes. I think he is facing some technical issues. I think we got Aman back. Hey, Aman.
A lot of us were purchasing IoT devices because they add a lot of comfort and I should say convenience. Why do you have to get up and start?
Hi, Aman. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Aman, I can hear you loud and clear. I think sorry, a bit of a technical glitch we had.
Yeah, the feedback. I'll just okay. So I can't hear you now, but you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly well. Thank you so much. I think you missed your introduction, but I gave him an introduction about you. So I'm going to let you get into your presentation so you can go ahead and share your screen. The stage is yours.
Okay. All right. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everybody around the globe. To my Indian friends, namaste. To my Malaysian friends, selamat petang. This is what happens sometimes. Yeah, you prepare the entire day, you arrive at the right time, and boom, just in a split second, your connection suddenly disappears. Yeah. Okay. So I really want to thank the organizers, Mr. Vasant, and of course the illustrious. Everybody refers to him as Mr. Haja, but he's just Haja to me. Yeah. Okay. Old friend. We have gone back a long, long time, and when Haja asked me to consider delivering the keynote for this event, I was a little taken aback, because you know how it is when you're outside in a professional setting and you put on your game face and the entire world thinks that you're polished and you're professional, but then you come back home and your wife or your spouse, they can see who you are. Haja is like that. So Haja has seen me at my best and at my worst. And when he said, no, I want you to do this, I thought, okay, all right, let me reschedule some events and make time for this. So let's see if I can make this work for us. Okay. All right, now I'm going to share the entire screen for a minute. It will be a bit cluttered. Okay. And then I'm going to do this. And Aditya, can you see what I'm trying to present?
I can see your slides. Perfect. Yep.
On WhatsApp or something like that.
You can check your chat. I can hear you.
Yeah?
Can see.
Okay.
Hear you.
All right. So I'm going to assume that you can see both my video and my PowerPoint presentation. If you cannot, someone let me know. Okay, you can. All right. Okay, good. Let's get to it. Okay. So what I have prepared for today's keynote, and I must admit, yeah, if I'm sounding a little light, that's just my nature. This is a huge moment and a personal honor for me. And when Haja asked, what would you like to say? I thought about Rocheston, and I thought about the journey that Haja and Rocheston have taken over the last few years. And I thought about my own personal passion over the last same few years. And to be honest, you and I hear the term innovating or innovation almost on a daily basis. I dare say, for the professional colleagues of mine that are on this stream, I dare say that you would not consider a cybersecurity vendor as worth consideration unless they had some kind of innovation tagged within their description. You know what I mean? And for my Indian friends, my mom is from India, yeah? Okay, so I'm kind of like half Indian. But the most innovative cybersecurity that you and I can see today, unfortunately, is not in the US, it's not in India, it's in one of the smallest nations on the planet. I just confirmed this maybe an hour or two ago because I wanted to make sure that in this forum, at least, what I said was true. It didn't have to be fact-checked, okay? And that country is Israel. From checkpoint to CyberArk, the list goes on. I'm not picking my favorites. These individuals have turned mathematical and engineering prowess into something remarkable and, dare I say, beautiful to behold. And so I put myself aside for a minute here, and I hope in these next 20 minutes or so, you can join me in a journey of the mind. I'm not being philosophical on purpose. There is a point that I want to make, and there is a thought I want to leave with you, my audience, at the end of this presentation. So bear with me, track with me, walk with me in my mind for just a few minutes. When you look at some of the trends that are talked about, reported on, Mr. Vasan did a glorious job in giving you all the facts and figures. That's not me. You can get the facts and figures from people who are much more equipped with them. Mr. Vasan, for example. In this little time that I have with you, I'd like to share my mind and my heart with you. Yeah? Walk with me for a minute. These organizations in Israel, they took mathematical prowess and engineering skills, and they created, the only word I can use is they created value-added journeys. Whether you are an identity and access management professional, an IAM architect, whether you are an endpoint specialist, whether you are a security operations center agent, you get my drift? They looked at your role, whether a user, whether a privileged user, whether a Linux or a Nix administrator or a Windows guru, they looked at your role and they asked the question, what is it that this person has to do? And why is the process that this person performs like that? And what technology can be transparently and value added enabling that particular set of activities? You've heard of the people, process, and technology. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a stack that is one. It's united. It's three in one. And this is not the subject matter of my discussion. This is just the introduction. This is where we are today. It's marvelous. Now, I can see the title of my own slide. It says The Road Ahead. But let me talk a little bit about where we are today. It's incredible for me. Aditya did. Every time I read about or I hear about someone describing me, I go, who's that? Then I realize I'm 51 years old, not to be personal, but I've been in this industry for a long time. Do you know, when I first started with VMware, it was version 4, which at that time was an innovation to the version 3 ecosystem. I can't see you, but I can imagine some of you going, yep, okay. And in that particular version, my clients and I used to stay up till the wee hours of the morning. Seriously, yeah? People on my client's end, my team and I, we would stay up to sometimes 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, strategizing, looking at the reference architectures, building integrated infrastructure. There was nothing like infrastructure as code. You know, there was no such thing as software-defined networking at all. I was there when those concepts were born, right there. Okay, wow. But I remember thinking about journeys, thinking about what an administrator is supposed to do. And I realized an administrator is supposed to maintain, is supposed to honor, is supposed to value, is supposed to uplift the design intention of the architect. Now, of course, no one speaks like that, but I think you and I would think about this sometimes. In the busyness of what an administrator for, let's say, VMware did, they were really tasked with maintaining the functional and the performance and the security and the value posture of their infrastructure entrusted to them. So I thought, now as a security professional, what can I do to add value, to enable, to come alongside, to put my arm around them and to say, you and I were on this journey together. Now, mind you, gentlemen, ladies, this was back in 2013, perhaps even slightly earlier, a long time ago. And I remember thinking about that and wondering, could I create a script, maybe using the command line interface, perhaps using PowerShell? And I'm not a natural born coder. I like to tell people I'm the best developer in town. The compilers hate me. I know the logic. I can sing songs about the flow, but I have trouble putting it down in natural third generational or even fourth generational code. But I overcame that hurdle just so that I could help this particular stakeholder of mine. Yeah? Track with me for a minute, track with me. And I tell you something, I wrote, my team mostly, and I wrote scripts that were long-winded. We had images for the hypervisor that had some customized drivers in them. I made sure that those drivers were certified not by any Tom, Dick, and Harry, but by the vendor themselves, if possible by VMware. And then I supervised the creation of, at that time, we called them VIBs, Virtual Infrastructure Bundles. Some of you remember. I'm going back into history now. And we placed these bundles with care and with joy in trusted repositories. But we did not require the administrator to be always on, to be always consistently with us. What we did was we said, listen, we're going to have pre-execution, you know, PXE booting, right? We're going to have basic DHCP served IP addresses. And when you power on an empty box for whatever use case, our scripts will take on the orchestration. This was the early days of orchestration back then, okay? And if our script worked, if it worked, it would automatically fetch the right image, load the right image on the bare metal, configure that image with security, functional, and performance harmonized configurations. Yeah? And I saw the administrator the first time we did this for a large organization. I saw that individual, let's call him John. I saw him smile. And I saw that security doesn't always have to be a cost center. It doesn't always have to be a pain. It doesn't always have to be constraining. It can do good at the person to person, at the process to process, and at the technology to technology level. Okay? But even though 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, even though we were able to do so much then, and now look at where we are. Our SIEMs, we have security operations and automated remediations. We have many flavors of this. We have Ansible, we have Puppet, we have Chef. Look, we have containerization. We can separate operating systems at different abstraction levels. Look at how much we have advanced in the enabling technology. And yet, gentlemen, yet, ladies, yet, my friends, we still saw this. When push came to shove, so now let me speak to my security colleagues in Malaysia, in London, in Australia, in the Netherlands, if you are listening. In spite of our best efforts, this is what happened, my friends. Okay? This is what happened. I got this from VMware's Carbon Black. Yeah, my early life in tech revolved around them, so I honor them here. But 148% increase in ransomware attacks. It's not like we had a baseline of 0 to begin with. 148% increase during a time of emergency, trial, and tribulation. 52% of all detected incidents worth talking about targeted the financial sector during this time. Something isn't working with the way we do security right now. And that has to be admitted by the gurus, in the bullpen, in the trenches individuals. When you take a look at some of the other very brief figures that I looked at recently, can you believe that there are hundreds of thousands of polymorphic or new malware samples which are produced every day? Let me just stop here for a minute, yeah? I'll put this together right now. I'm just looking at the time. I started this conversation with you by saying that way back in 2013, when I did not have the kind of orchestration tools that everybody now has access to, can learn to use and use wisely, I desired to orchestrate, to automate, to enable, to uplift. But at the same time, I spoke with individuals in the Eastern Bloc. I spoke with individuals in the former USSR and in Eastern Europe, where I used to work. I used to work in Bulgaria for a couple of years. And I can tell you one thing, just like you in India have to understand mathematics to a certain level, multiply that by 10. That is the level of competence, the level of capability that your adversaries out there have. You know, when you and I draft PowerPoint slides or write pen test reports with literacy skills, the guys who are entering university for computer science, no specialization, within the first semester, they've got to hack into a 3,000-line hardened code base set up by a PhD candidate whose job it is to prevent that hack. And those individuals treated this hack as a rite of passage. They were not taught, they simply had to research and learn. So when I asked them from the Eastern European and the ex-Soviet Union countries, I remember speaking to a guy from Lithuania. I asked this individual, how is it that you are able to create malware items with such speed and prowess? And they told me, It's like speaking a language. It's not a big deal. And certain other topics of discussion, I'll keep it between him and I. And we are improving. This is a very depressing number. But when you take a global average, it does take, even with the current technology and the value addedness we have today, it still takes this long to identify data breaches. I run classes for departments of defense and government ministries sometimes. And when I explain to them the kind of kill chain, the indicators of compromise, the loopholes in protocols, the methods by which organizations or organized cyber criminals take advantage of our own tools, how they utilize living off the land, as we call it, mechanisms. You see the security professionals in my audience, they've been there, they've heard it, they know it, and you can see into their eyes a little depression form because they don't quite know what to do, okay? And in response to the kind of malware or other threats that we have seen, which Mr. Vasant gave us very lovelily, he gave us all of that. I found some figure that, may have increased in recent times, but out of this particular amount, what I really focused on was 72% of the investment was focused on threat intelligence, detection and response capabilities. And that seems to be the trend in every subsector of cybersecurity today. Only 28% from one particular report I read of this investment focused on reducing the attack surface. Now, you know what the attack surface is. I don't need to tell you it's about pipes, it's about user interfaces, it's about all sorts of APIs in our API-centric world. But this much I need to share with you. In the 20 years I've tried to do something that made security value added and sensible, I've learned one thing. Most of our stakeholders get it. They want to be secure, they want to be safe, they want to achieve business objectives, they want their cake and to eat it too. They want harmony. But in order to give them this harmony, our current approach to cybersecurity is seemingly focused on either finding a threat and preventing the exploitation of vulnerabilities, you know what that is, or hardening our images, our infrastructure, our roles, our processes through standardization, or both. And you know what the sad realization I came away with was? When we start our cybersecurity approach that way, during a kickoff meeting, some of you I can see are nodding your heads in my mind. When we start the kickoff meeting and the spirits are high and the leadership and the governance commitment is at the highest it can ever be, you feel that you might have a fighting chance to enable a business objective safely. And then within a few short months, it deteriorates into bureaucratic, fill in the form, let's get this over and done with before the manager shouts at us kind of process. I hope this is only my experience, but I doubt it. Okay? So what is the point I'm making? We desire, you and I, to add value to our stakeholders by what we do in cybersecurity, by what we advise and how we consult and how we train. We have nailed the fact that without the adversary, there really isn't any insecurity. Okay? And we have focused all of our muscle power on identifying and defeating the threat as early as possible or recovering as fast as humanly possible. We have attempted to educate our stakeholders on the need to harden environments, infrastructure, applications, networks, processes, roles. And how have we done that as a community? like this. You know, I listened to a presentation from one of the senior managers in VMware quite recently, and I'll give him the credit for this story. He said, imagine if you go, so I'm not going to repeat his story, but my story is based on his. Imagine if you go to a doctor and say that you've got symptoms and you're worried you might have COVID-19. And the doctor says, take 5,000 plus pills. Or you can take this unified set of pills plus something else. How would you feel? It seems that a lot of our stakeholders are that way inclined now. It seems that when we finish with our pitch that cybersecurity can add value, when we actually deliver on the architecture that we have won a buy-in into, all of the products and the vendors start to come in. Procurement processes take over, project management is rolled out, you get the drift. And we end up with a heterogeneous, not so complex in some cases and highly complex in other cases mesh. Okay? And this is not a diagram from the 1990s, this is a diagram from last week. And it's only going to explode. More and more vendors will claim innovative thought leadership, and better ways of doing the same thing. So if what we have right now is broken, what is the road ahead? Okay. We can summarize the factors that inhibit real innovation. And I mean, you know, sometimes when we hear innovation, we think really about incremental, step by step, or architectural, or disruptive. But what I think we really need to do is take a step back, and be radical. Now, I'll go through this slide in just a second. Let me ask you, I can't see the chat message right now, yeah, but let me ask you, what do you think innovation is? I can see some of you, especially in India, Googling it right now. Go for it. You get about 45 definitions. How do I know? I did that. Do you know what innovation meant in the 1400s? Yeah. Long time ago. Do you know what it meant? It meant rebellion. It meant heresy. I'm not talking about religious heresy. I'm talking about deviating from normal thinking, business as usual. Okay? And it meant completely abandoning the status quo to just go with what you know is true. Now, I think some of us have to grab hold of that particular thinking process and say, it's time to rebel against the way we have done security, because even if we know we are doing the best we can with some of these vendors, this and this still happens. So what can I do? I have a solution in 1 hour? But maybe I can place a thought in our minds that we will keep thinking about when the other illustrious speakers present their more in-depth topics on threat management, on IoT security and the like. This one point I want to leave with you, which I'm coming to, maybe we can keep that in mind as we listen to them. As I get to that one point, track with me. The three main factors that are inhibiting radical, rebellious breakthrough would be something that we know inside of us. You don't need me to tell you, but let us voice it out together from the rooftops and from the mountaintops so that we acknowledge the problem and the pain. And we say that we have been preaching, we have been asking, we have been in some cases begging for security by design, but it just doesn't seem to have captured the hearts and the minds of those with the power to make a difference. You know, I work with developers, my friends. Okay, stranger. The boy with the broken code is now working with developers. Some senior, if I mention the names, you know who they are. And when I speak with developers, junior and senior, to a person, they all want their coding standards to be intrinsically safe. They don't want to have to do certain second step, third step, fourth test to be able to prove that what they've written with functional logic, according to their coding standard, is secure. In other words, we now have the beginnings of AI-enabled tools that will suggest Python code. When you type something out, it will suggest Python code, just like Grammarly would suggest a better way of writing. It's not that your English language, your script is bad. It's just that there is a better way. And better also in many cases means safer. We're heading towards that direction. But it is very slow. And the vendors who are producing tools that are AI or AGI driven in that way are few and far between, and their voices are being drowned out by everybody else. You be the loudspeaker. Why should we force a developer, for example? Look, guys, ladies, gentlemen, you know that everything is as code now. Everything, compliance as code, infrastructure as code, identity as code. You get the drift. Everything is as code. If you did not know that, you're welcome. Everything is as code. And so when I speak with developers whose life job is to harness that code to deliver functionality and logic, they say, give us the tools that as we write, it's inherently safe. The second inhibiting factor is, again, something that isn't rocket science, but all of these siloed approaches to being secure, you know what I mean? How many ransomware incidents were caused by the cybersecurity guru doing the wrong thing? None. Well, some, but very few. How many of them were caused by an individual just trying to respond to an email in the best way that he knows how, and he makes a mistake? That is what I mean by siloed. What you and I have heard about siloed is that there are blocks of security management and specializations. And maybe there's an underlying fabric that's clear to you. But when it comes to John, the end user, who just wants to get on with doing his task, and an email arrives, and there's nothing in front of him that intrinsically says, do not click or quarantines this. Now you can say, my company, we have all of the EDR and other mechanisms, so we're down. Okay, Aman, don't worry about us. But take a global landscape. And many organizations, I just spent weeks with a company in this region, an investment house, where the administrator who was certified and trained, supposedly the cybersecurity champion of that organization, used the same password for backup and online backup. And so when a particular flavor of ransomware came in, the attackers, the cyber criminals, they locked the vital records of that investment house with 8 keys. 8 keys. Now I know that you don't normally hear this in a keynote speech, but I told my client to go and pay the ransom. Because after the incident, that's the wrong time to proclaim a sermon about what to do and how to have done it. You see, the thing is, siloed is not just about different vertical stacks. Siloed is when we separate people, process, and tech. And then, the third inhibitor may surprise some of us. Imagine 78% of cybersecurity investment focused on threat chasing, so that our security posture in a nutshell is threat-centric, okay? And now we are saying that that is one of the inhibitors. Because you can imagine if I asked you, okay, I'm just going to imagine that, all right, I'm going to bring Aditya here. Aditya, don't say anything. I'm just going to bring you in for a little role play over here. Imagine, Aditya, if I asked you to walk with me for 1 week inside my home and outside my home. Compile in your mind or whatever tool that you have at your disposal every aspect of my behavior. Focus on one specific scenario that can threaten the length of my shadow. Are you beginning to see? Okay. My shadow is caused by the sun. The identity in my example, which is my shadow, can be changed based on the context of what I do. But if we are so rigid in focusing on threat centricity, I'm not speaking about the top of the range companies here. In many cases, even if we use adaptive or attribute-based authentication, it's incredible. I really have to stand within a certain distance from my house at a certain time to have my shadow, my identity token, so to speak, fit the behavior profile that Mr. Aditya has collated for me. Okay, so if these are the three, bolted on, siloed, and threat-centric inhibitors, what is the solution? Now, I have a question mark here. Is it really, excuse me, I've been speaking a lot today. Okay. Is it really intrinsic security like SANS and VMware and other thought leaders say? Intrinsic security simply says that security by design should work. People, process, and technology should be unified. And instead of focusing on the myriad threats, the multiple facets of what can threaten our assets, we look at the appropriate behavior of people, the appropriate behavior in processes, the appropriate behavior of apps, the appropriate use cases for infrastructure. And we compile that into known good use cases, or in simple terms, the known good. And we design solutions that can compare desired access against the known good. And we enforce these solutions in a transparent way that doesn't add friction to specific administrator or user journeys. I get what they're saying, but my vision for this year, yes, this year, in spite of COVID-19, for the next year, my vision for these conferences, my vision for my good friends like Haja, is whatever we do, let us enable the journeys like my friend John, the administrator from 2013. Let us walk alongside the developers in our mind or in our design or in person. Let us walk alongside the roles. Let us do the work that has to be done to understand workflows, to understand the trials and tribulations of other roles that are not us, and see whether we can fashion all of the beautiful, innovative, AI-centric tools that we have right now into a transparent, frictionless, journey-celebrating solution. You know, to me, and I'll end in a couple of minutes, this is the thought I'd like to leave you with, as the other speakers, with much more detail and much more focus, take you into a journey of cybersecurity trends and innovations. This is the thought I'd like to leave you with. Imagine for a minute if security could be transformed into Kindness. Yeah, you heard me right. Kindness. What does that bald-headed fellow mean? I'll tell you. Thank you for asking. Kindness means that we empower an individual to do right at the right time in the right way. We don't demand or expect, we empower. And how do we empower? Take your mind back to that celebrated, notorious event years ago involving the attack against the DIN name server farm. 500,000 nanny cams, you know this, were harvested into a botnet. And the command and control master, he used that for a DDoS attack with the Mirai. You remember? Framework. He used that to attack name servers belonging to celebrated companies. You know what the root cause of that attack was? Not the fact that the open source malware framework was out there, not the fact that there was a botnet of IoT or OT devices. You know what I caught from that analysis? I caught this. The credentials that the manufacturer had placed as default credentials, that manufacturer had asked their customers to please change it. My friends, if you put a load into the washing machine and you switch the washing machine on today, and it goes a little bit, and you have forgotten to put some other items into that same machine, do you think you can open the door, even if you desire to? We can mistake proof normal household devices, but we don't seem to be able to mistake proof basic user use cases, basic workflows. I'm not talking about automate. Automate is yesterday's news. I'm talking about being kind by not requiring a user to be superhuman in consistently following all the right protocols. What's the difference between automation and my story? I am saying, instead of automate where you ask the user not to be involved in the workflow, it's done for them, we use a very ancient Japanese concept that I teach in some of my other classes, which is mistake proofing, pokayoke, where you cannot use that nanny cam unless you have, in a simple, easy to follow way, changed the baseline credentials. Simple things like that. They are happening everywhere around us, but that's just one example of what I mean by journey-centric information or cybersecurity being kind. The second example, as I come to a close, would be humility. I know you don't hear this in conference like this, but humility means that we do not know everything there is about what needs to be done to secure someone else's role, someone else's process, or some other technology. You know, I've worked with some of the largest organizations on this planet. And I can tell you, most individuals, most stakeholders are not resistant to the change that cybersecurity design, like yours and mine, brings to the table. They're not resistant. They just don't want to be victims of that change. They want to participate in it. If I learned one thing with John in 2013, I asked John, what do you like and what do you not like about this role? John said he loved the fact that he was able to help the organization save money and do things in a more efficient way, all those nice things. And then he kept quiet. And then I said, John, what do you not like about this role as an administrator? Simple example. And he said, the fact that whenever something goes right, no one knows my name. But when something goes wrong, everyone does. And so, journey-centric security, architected, as you will hear by my illustrious colleagues moving on, in all of its glory and complexity. Journey-centric security is security that enables, comes alongside, transparently lifts up individuals in their day-to-day business as usual task, enabled by technology which is transparent and intrinsically secure. So that when someone asks them, what are you doing to be secure? They look surprised and say, we just do the work that we're supposed to do, and it is inherently secure. Okay? As I say thank you and pass this time to Aditya, I want to leave one example of journey-centric security with you. And those of you in India would know this name, Bug Tracker. Remember this name. That organization has revolutionized not bounty hunting, no. It has revolutionized journey-centric security where hackers, some full-time and some part-time, come alongside security agents and people like us and say to us, let us help you in what you do. And let us bring a fresh pair of eyes and maybe a certain set of deeper skills to uncover weaknesses that you've missed. And let us then come alongside you and help you to fix it. You see, 86% of the hackers on Bug Tracker do it for altruistic reasons. They want to help. If we can do the same, and we desire to help our stakeholders, the innovation that lies ahead will not be spoken about historically, will not be spoken about as the year that AI took over, or the year that agents were more value added, or the year that complexity was simplified. It will be spoken of as the year that security mattered. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I pass the time back to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aman, for that very enlightening and empowering talk. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm going to leave the stage open for questions from the audience. I think we do have one question, Aman. I'll read that one out to you, and then the audience can ask more questions. What does infrastructure as a service mean? So, what does infrastructure as a service mean? The audience has asked a question. Question from the audience.
Okay, there is a bit of feedback here. And Aditya, if there are questions, just like what you've done, just type them in the chat and I'll get to them, yeah? Okay. So what is infrastructure as a service? Well, if you look at Amazon, if you look at Red Hat, you look at the IBM cloud, you look at the Google cloud, okay? Infrastructure as a service simply means that instead of being concerned with the memory and the CPU and the configurations of each box in a cluster, and that is your main focus, you can now focus on the functions that memory and the CPU and all of those configurations provide to you. Okay, so when I used to move workloads onto infrastructure as a service, say Amazon Web Services, all I had to worry about was what do I want my application to do on top of this OS, and then I'll place my application and the OS into a container. And that container happened to be at that time a VM. I'm using the word container in a loose manner. Okay? I did not really have to worry about where the physical memory and the physical CPU was. So I just focused on that level of what we call abstraction. Okay? It's a good question, and I'm not quite sure where to pitch my answer. But in a nutshell, infrastructure as a service, you focus on the as a service, and you don't concern yourself with the nuts and bolts as to how the services that memory and CPU provide are given to you. That's in a nutshell. I hope that's okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Aman. I don't think there are any more questions. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And we were really, really privileged to hear your views. It was very empowering and very enlightening. Thank you so much.